Got Your Eers On is brought to you by Tactical Legion 9. All
right, everybody, hello and welcome to this week's episode of Got Your Eers On. Happy New Year, Guido here, along with Scoot.
Yo.
And Johnson.
Gophers and Longhorns and a special guest, Guido.
Yeah, I know. Big episode this week, guys. Guaranteed rate bowl. Not fun to talk about. WVU loses 18-6 against the Minnesota Golden Gophers. But good news is we're excited that we have somebody who is definitely smarter than us and knows more about WVU sports than we do. Mike Casazza from earsports.com, 247Sports.com. Thanks for joining us, Mike. We're excited to have you on the show, man.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for the introduction. I don't usually have it put in that direction. Usually people insist they know more than me. I'm not sure I agree with you, but let's see if we can figure this out by the end of the conversation.
Yeah, man, for sure. I guess, we've got a lot to talk about with WVU football this week, but I feel like we got to talk about what the biggest news is that's out there right now, man, which is Jarret Doege has entered the transfer portal, will not be at WVU next year as a quarterback. And, Mike, what's your take on that?
It was kind of a winding road to get there, which is kind of typical for if you're trying to follow this team. It doesn't ever go from point A to point B. There's always some sort of shade or gray area in the middle that's hard to navigate and understand. And what we were left thinking, if you're watching the game or you paid attention, that sideline report on ESPN for the Texas game, Doege didn't walk on senior day, and then the sideline reporter drops during the game that he's talking about coming back because
right.
He and Bryce Ford Wheaton can be special together. And then after the game, you ask him and the coach about it, and they both don't want to talk about it. So that was obscure, which is kind of how it went for a lot of this whole the messaging here. Because before the game, he's like, "I don't want to make it about me. I don't want to talk about it." I just refuse to believe that decision wasn't made. We'd heard during the season that he wasn't going to be coming back, and that I don't know if it was during the open week or whatever, but that had been pretty much confirmed, or they'd had the conversation about it. So to say they hadn't talked about it always seems strange to me. But there's so many degrees of what is a conversation. What'd you all talk about? So who knows? Right. You could plausible deniability maybe be right, but I guess the big thing here is that you don't have to talk about it or worry about it anymore, and you get on with what's next. And then I think if you were clamoring for a change of quarterback, or if you weren't going to be excited about him being back next season, you kind of have what you want right now, and you reconcile your feelings about the offense or 6, 7, or whatever number Marchio is going to wear. Which one do you like better? Which offense is going to fit this team the best? We'll see. But I don't think it was a surprise if you'd been paying attention to things too. It just seemed like it was unnecessarily complicated, but I kind of feel bad for a guy who doesn't walk on senior day and who doesn't want to let his intentions known, because if you'll notice in his farewell, never said he was going to the portal, just said he wanted to have a new home next year, and he never said goodbye to the fans. He never said thank you to the fans. You look at all these Twitter farewells or Instagram farewells, and there's always like, "Hey, Mountaineer Nation, thanks for this. Right. You guys always back." That was noticeably absent from that. So for a guy who didn't want to walk on senior day, for whatever account you want to believe there, but didn't want to walk on senior day, and then doesn't say anything to the fans, you could fill in the gaps there too. And this place sometimes has a hobby of eating its own. And you look at what happened with Skylar Howard and the way he's treated his legacy here since then.
That's right.
That can be difficult for people. So I kind of feel for that guy, and getting bludgeoned in the last game didn't help either, I'm sure.
Is that partly Jarrett's personality that we're seeing, or is that part Neil Brown's personality that we're seeing, where this is kind of like this meandering, kind of obscure? Who do you think has more influence on that?
I don't want to go on a tangent here because I've had my soapbox out in this for a while, but it's just hard to get a straight story on stuff or a straight answer on things. Who's calling plays? Why is that so complicated? Right?
Why? We were just talking why is it not transparent?
Yeah, and then you could probably tell during the game it certainly looked like Neil was more involved in the play calling in the bowl game too, which maybe that's natural because Sirocco was on the other side of the field. Actually, he wasn't. He's on the other team at this point. But anyways, look, if Doege's vanilla and that's your quarterback, you can do a lot with that. You can program your quarterback, and if your quarterback's robotic, that can be good sometimes. He was good when he played within the constructs, but when you have to color outside the lines, it's difficult. And unfortunately for him, a lot of college football, especially on offense, is played outside the lines. Not outside the sidelines, but you got to get outside the play sometimes. And that's what they wanted him to get better at. And he just never really progressed there too. And I think sometimes he tried to a fault. And you could tell that was a guy in the pocket who wasn't comfortable, but also did not want to get outside the pocket too, which is a pretty dubious combination for a quarterback, right? So yeah, I think he wanted to be a really good quarterback, and he just bought in completely to what the coaches were telling him, and that's admirable. And he just didn't have that comfort, that zest to really get out and excel, like I said, outside the lines. He really wanted to color inside the lines, and listen, you can do that, and you can create a beautiful picture too. But a lot of teams aren't going to let you do that. They're going to force you outside and make you play ugly a little bit because they want you to, right? They don't want you to sit in your comfort space. They want to put you in their crosshairs. And he did not like being a moving target. I think.
Right, I agree with that.
And now, it brings a lot of questions, and you talked about it, like the offensive play structure, and now we've seen more wide receivers. Winston Wright joins the transfer portal group of guys that's leaving. You don't see this problem on defense. Like Jordan Leslie, I mean, you're seeing, Josh Chandler-Samato's coming back. You don't see the problem on defense. On offense, it's like nobody understands who's calling the plays. You got guys leaving left and right. I mean, do you think, Mike, in the offseason, we're going to see a complete overhaul of this offensive coaching staff?
I think you'll see some changes because I don't know how you can look at what's happened in the past, we're at 35 games now, and say, yeah, that's it. We need to keep doing that because important players don't agree with that. And, it's hard to really drill down into the transfer issue because it is societal right now, and it's kind of built into college football to be this way too, where you really have quick fixes somewhere else and you have an instant gratification, but that's also facilitated by immediate eligibility and the transfer portal. And just to be frank, tampering. Like there's definite tampering that goes on. Like I will tell you that like one player who left last year definitely was tampered with and ended up at a school that you go, oh, that makes sense, right? So that stuff happens, but the thing is that like you are right for the picking in bad situations or situations that aren't especially fun. And when your offense is scoring as many points as the other team's right tackle,
Yeah.
when when you're not getting touchdowns, and when you're constantly pushing the boulder up the hill, that's not fun. And these kids watch games and they have friends and they get to know people from the recruiting circuit, and they're all on social media. And what are they seeing? They're seeing this guy that they're better than, who's at a Power 5 school or who's at a really good Group of 5 school that's making plays that he thinks he should be making. I think that's extremely influential right now, and there's nothing in there to stop it. So could it be a culture thing? Could there be, has the milk gone bad, so to speak? Yeah, there's probably some of that. I think when you have so many players, it's impossible to say that's not part of it. I think a lot of it's just human nature. So, the one thing about this, though, is you can't really control on your roster who stays and goes. You can control who you pay. And these guys all have 1 year left because they all got either extended or had their contracts continued into the 2023 season. So they're all under contract for next year. But it's not like they can't fire people. And I think you're going to see probably a way for guys to just end up getting a job somewhere else. They don't get fired, but that person may be gone. And I just don't think it would be healthy to assume you could bring everybody back and do the same things and expect better results. Now, could you bring the same people back, but facilitate that with some sort of philosophical change, some sort of shift in offense, and the same people do something different and create different results? Yeah. Does that not change? I think that would be satisfactory. So if they came back with the same people and did the same thing, I think people should be concerned and maybe upset. If they come back with the same people and do different things, if they come back with different people and thus do different things, then you kind of arch your brow a little bit and say, all right, this is something. This is like they're identifying the problem. They're trying to do it. The trouble is coaches love continuity. They just love it. They're control freaks, and they're paranoid sometimes too, and they worry about what change may do. That's a risk some guys aren't willing to take. And when you're a young coach who's gotten here by doing things your way, you really don't want to let that slip too much.
Right. And I mean, this is really hard sometimes because I'm a Neil Brown guy. Like, I like Neil Brown. And, I would imagine that I'm a typical West Virginian. Like, I didn't like Holgorsen. I like Neil Brown. And it's a personality thing, right? Like, that's how West Virginians are. Like, we love that guy because he's so folksy and lovable, and Holgorsen wasn't that. But at some point, does Shane Lyons, does the institution, does the state start to go, what are we doing here? Like, there's been no marked improvement in 3 years.
Yeah, but I would say, I guess I can hum that song, no doubt about it. I think a lot of people can too. But I think you could also argue that here and now is why you hire Neil Brown. He got himself into it. Can he get himself out of it? And that's when you figure out what you got as a coach. Like, if he's gotten here now and he says, okay, 3 seasons into this, I've seen the Big 12, backward and forward, 3 times now. And I know that what I tried didn't work, but 3 years, gave it a whirl, and it needs a tweak. It needs an overhaul, whatever you want to do, somewhere, one extreme or somewhere in between. Now is the time where you kind of say, all right, does this guy have it or not? Because if he can adapt and adjust and win, that's really promising. But if he doesn't see a problem and doesn't address it, that's concerning too. So I think that's again, I understand what you're saying, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think that another person or even the same person could say, well, okay, but now is when a really good coach figures out how to fix or figures out how to mix. What can he do? And when you look at what Baylor did between their year 1 and year 2 with Dave Aranda,
Right.
that is a stark contrast between his first season and his second season. And what did he do? He fired his offensive line coach. He fired his offensive coordinator. He brought in BYU's guys. And they're not running BYU's offense that you saw with Zach Wilson. They're running like a smash mouth run offense, but it's not what they were doing. Their offensive coordinator his first year was Larry Fedora, who's an air raid guy. They are not an air raid team. And they played with a pretty bashful quarterback. A linebacker was their leading rusher. They just found ways to be good, and they hit in a couple transfers, but they changed. And they were proactive about it. They said, we're not going to back up 2 or 3 times. We realize that we're in reverse right now and we got to go forward. And they did it. Now, can you apply that same fix everywhere? No. Aranda's really, really good. And coaches are going to come and work for him. I'm not saying Brown isn't. I'm just saying it's not the same everywhere. Everybody can't do the same tricks. But the capacity exists. And I think you're not trying, you're failing.
Yeah, I hope that it changes. I mean, with this recruiting class that's coming in, and I guess more specifically with the quarterback situation now that Doege's out, you keep hearing. I mean, Neil Brown said it all signing day, Mike. He was like, Nico is going to be an impactful day one. Nico is, I watched 3 interviews with him on that day, and I think all 3 of them, he said the exact same thing. Like, he's going to be impactful when he gets on campus. I mean, are we going to see him against Pitt? Throwing the ball around? Or is this going to be Garrett Green? Because, obviously, and, you probably know more than we do, there's something between Garrett Green and this offensive coaching staff that just didn't jive. And they put him out there, and it might be him. It might be he's not ready. But I don't see that love coming back between now and first kick of next year. So are we going to see a true freshman starting quarterback at WVU?
You're probably likely to see Crowder if you're going to see anybody. I think they really like Will Crowder. And I think that they kind of have like a, what's the phrase, a cat canary kind of thing. Whereas if they had a traditional high school season his senior year, and a lot of those Southern schools have gotten a look at him, or ACC schools have gotten a look at him, it might have been hard to keep him. I think they really believe he's a good player and has good pedigree and knows what he's doing. And they watched him early for a while and they got on him. And then that whole recruiting year was strange. So they might have gotten a break there too, where maybe it wasn't so competitive. Maybe a lot of people didn't get to come down and visit him on campus. So I think he's a candidate probably more so than Marchio, unless Marchio just comes in and lights it up. And I think he has that ability too. We did a podcast with Clint Brewster, who is Tim Brewster's son, college football coach Tim Brewster, but he also played quarterback. Big Ten, Minnesota, I believe, right? Yeah, his dad was a Minnesota coach. So that's kind of funny how that works. But he's a talent evaluator for 247, and he's known Marchio for a while. And I'm not plugging here, but like when we had a podcast with him, he said some really interesting things about a guy who has been to different high schools and has started every time. He's gone there right away. He started as a freshman. He started at a different school. He's won big every time. And then if you watch, like, just I know we're all kind of in love with the moment right now, but if you go back during his senior season, he had some big time performances against really good teams, and none greater than that Bishop Gorman game where they were down by, I forget, 17 points in a minute left.
Yeah.
He's vomiting on the ball, throwing the game-winning touchdown pass. Like, now he might be vomiting for different reasons against, like, Oklahoma State, whatever, but like at least he's comfortable with it, right? So there's something there too, but Green's one that kind of interests me because there's just a different offense there, and there's a different wrinkle that you can do. I know Marchio can run, and it looks like Crowder's got some wiggle too, but this guy's just different, and I think there's like a competitiveness within him that's kind of fun, and we never got to see unleashed. And I wonder how much damage that could have or actually did do, because I think a lot of what he does is the color outside the lines. And I don't think you want to completely discourage that too, but I think that he was probably so in love with that sometimes, or so quick to it that was to a detriment. That was probably held against him too. But let me ask you guys a question. Do you expect a transfer portal, an acquisition
for quarterback? I don't know.
Or a stopgap until Nico's ready, I guess, maybe.
I mean, do you really want to go into Pitt if you're 17 and 18 and you're coming off a sub 500 season? You have Pitt and Virginia Tech on your non-conference schedule, right? Do you really want to go in with like, listen, we're just going to throw this guy in there and see if he can do it, and maybe we play 2 quarterbacks? Like, I really wonder about that. And it's a different world. Like if you're a couple games over 500, or if you're coming off a good season, you have some cachet you can use, right? That does not exist right now. And I wonder how much that factors into the calculus here too. I also wonder if Lyons and Brown haven't had a candid conversation of like, listen, 2022, whatever, wins, great. You're not supposed to win 10. You're not going to win 10. Figure out quarterback. That's the goal in 22. That would be interesting to me, but I also wonder if that is acceptable. I think wins matter for sure, especially if you're coming off a losing season too, and you got the natives are whatever they are, but certainly not throwing parties about this stuff too. And if there's a guy out there who's a senior and who has some experience and who wants to play, I think you could do worse than that. At least having that guy in the room isn't even a bad idea.
Do you think that Brown senses the pressure? At times, I feel like I don't want to say he doesn't sense it, but at times, my issue with Neil Brown has been, it feels like at times he thinks he sees something totally different, or maybe he sees things in practice that we don't see. But as the casual fan or even the invested fan, when we see something that doesn't look like we want it to look, and then he comes out in a press conference or post-game conference and basically says, we just things didn't go our way, or we weren't prepared, or to me, I don't know. I hope he senses the pressure, but I don't know that he does. Does he?
I've watched him for 3 years now too, and like I've tried to study him, and I could speak Dana's language pretty well by the time that he got done there too. I don't have Neil figured out quite as well, and I just don't. We don't have the same access to him as we did, but we haven't had as much time either. Don't get me wrong. Like last season was really bizarre. You couldn't do anything in person last year, so that's kind of a sidestep in the whole getting to know you process. But I did watch a guy this year. It looked like he was carrying the weight on his shoulders much more than the first year for sure. Hard to tell on Zoom, but he just looked like he was agitated about different things, and that he knew. I think that his personality is such that his disposition has to be, optimistic and positive and forward marching, and that's probably really important to be a head coach. So I think he's not going to let the ghost in the room, so to speak. He's going to try to keep everything outside that he can, and he's not going to create a talking point by saying something that is going to become a talking point. Let's not forget, they used to have football without news conferences, right?
Right.
Like they still played it, and it was still fun to watch and coach and play and everything too. So I think sometimes that, and this is me in the media saying that we probably fall in love with a goofy soundbite or something that can be picked apart. And sometimes it's just a guy answering a question. And what I mean by this is, like, there was a point, it was after the first game of the season where they said that he was evaluating Doege's play, and he said, well, he only made 12 mistakes. There were 60 plays, right? So he made one mistake every 5 plays. But what I'm saying is, like, that's an honest evaluation that we probably used against him or the player too. And then so now you're hurting the guy for being honest with you. And the time that he's not honest or he's not as forthcoming, you're saying, well, he was not being honest, he's not being forthcoming. Well, we can't have it both ways too. So again, like, I don't want to say this, but I think sometimes we probably put too much into the news conference aspect of things. And I think body language can be as revealing sometimes as an answer. And I just saw a guy this year who, to answer your question, I think he knew it. I think he was feeling it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little different than it was even 10 years ago. I mean, you don't have 15 random podcasts talking about you every week and all of these real and not real news media outlets and Facebook and Twitter posts. So it's definitely a different world now in the scheme of everything. I do worry, going back to your comment about picking a quarterback up from the transfer portal or whatever, what kind of quarterback wants to come to WVU when they've seen, Jarret Doege spent, I feel like, half of the season on his back, and blame the offensive line, blame Jarret Doege for whatever reason it was. That's a hard sell, I think, to a quarterback that's in the transfer portal saying, hey, come to us. Don't look at the highlights last year where we had the quarterback that led the NCAA in getting sacked,
I was keeping my eye on Charlie Brewer for a while, and he's going to Liberty now, but that's the guy I was watching because of the rapport. It was very much a Doege parallel to me. I thought that'd be interesting. That didn't happen. Like I said, he's going to Liberty, but you're looking at a guy like that who needs the redemption and who's got that one last shot or that 1 year to do it. And I think that you could probably sell somebody on the offensive line. I think that they're probably going to try to fix their left tackle spot. I know Brandon Yates has played a lot, but has he played great football in spurts? Not terrific by any means, but left guard, center, right guard, right tackle is pretty good. And Yates is fine. If Yates is your starting left tackle, you can do something with that too. But I wouldn't be surprised if they go out and they try to get a left tackle in the portal, or if they move maybe Milam to left tackle. There's options there to make it work. Milam also is the right tackle for Markey. It was pretty interesting too. That's the blind side for left-handed quarterback. Hey, why not? But
yeah,
I think a guy that can run a little bit and that can play outside of the lines, I think that's going to be an important thing. And if you've got a guy who's been behind really good quarterbacks, or a guy who's a group of 5 who wants to play at a Power 5 level, or a guy that you just know can do stuff because you know him from high school or you know him from playing against him earlier. You're looking for that. I wonder if they're going to be in the room with a lot of stars. Apparently, I've not heard this from anybody here, but the quarterback from, his name has escaped me now, but like the division, the FCS Heisman Trophy winner, and he wants to come up and play. But like, apparently West Virginia's been in contact, but he's got multiple years left. Would you say no to a guy like that, or would you, because he's got a couple years, or would you say yes to him because he's a talent, he can do it? That's where you get into the gray area. I'm not sure what you do. I think that you want a guy who's going to be here 1 year and maybe has a chance to have 2 years. But now you're also saying, am I forsaking a full season? Because you're probably going to lose Green or Crowder if you bring in a transfer.
Right. Yep.
Because you're making him wait. Now, if those guys don't want to compete and beat the guy, that's interesting too. So, last year I didn't think they needed a backup. I thought they had to have somebody who could do something that Doege couldn't, which would be move the pocket, get outside and do stuff. I didn't think you needed another Doege or somebody who's going to be a backup. This year, I think you would go in and you would get somebody to come in and start for sure, but also somebody who could do the stuff that Doege did, and a guy who's mobile and does some things that just look different. I think that would keep people happy. But you're right, that's going to be a hard sell for people. I don't know who's going to be that guy.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. So, moving from the offensive side of the ball to the defensive side of the ball, Jordan Leslie, on the other hand, post-game press conference for or post-game interview from the Guaranteed Rate Bowl, talked a lot about you're going to be surprised in 2022. We're still young. There's a lot of happening. You see Josh Chandler-Semedo decide to come back for whatever year it is now that they get. They get, 15 years to play college football now. But he comes back for his final senior year. Defensively, this team looks strong throughout the year. Is there a lot of changes that you feel like need to be made defensively for us next year?
They're going to have to figure out their safety spots because they lost 2 guys who played about, I think it's like over 90% of the snaps the past 2 seasons. And I thought, frankly, that Adai and Mahone looked like that this year. They look like they kind of like were dragging themselves toward the finish line a little bit. Good seasons, both been good players, but too much tread on their tires, I think. Or not enough tread in their tires. I forget how that goes, but played too much football probably. And they just couldn't get guys in the field. But they were also really beat up in the secondary this year. And there's probably a way that they could play Jackie Matthews or Charles Woods at a safety spot, but they were always spinning. Or Scotty Young too, for that matter. They could have played those guys back there and gotten some depth. They're always spinning because of injuries and not being able to use freshmen. So the big thing for me is how they're going to fill the 2 safety spots, Cat and Free. I like their cornerback situation now, which is not something you really said for a while, because while they've had top tier players, they've not had depth. And now you're looking at Fortune, Woods. I love Daryl Porter's, just his pedigree and the way he played this year too. And there's a lot of room to improve, I think, for him. That's 3 guys who can play, and they're pretty high on Andrew Wilson Lamp. And I'm kind of surprised he redshirted this year, especially amid the injuries. But they think he's a guy who can really run. And just for a kind of hint to his athleticism, they had him returning kickoffs in camp this year too to see what he could do. And he looked really good doing it. That's a guy who can run, and that's a high school receiver. So that's the type of frame you're working with there. Put him at corner. That's interesting. Now, will he end up at safety? I don't know. It's a big, rangy guy. So there's something to work with there. Spear, it looks like St. McLeod, their spear for the future. A lot to work with there. Getting Samito back helps at middle linebacker, because you're probably looking at Lance Dixon or Lee Koba, the junior college transfer. Probably playing him at Mike. You don't have to worry about that now. You can keep Dixon at will. X3 Lowe is a redshirt junior.
I feel like he's been with us for 8 years.
Yeah.
I feel like he's been around.
Yeah.
I think Tony Gibson recruited him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's still on the team. And then we haven't gotten to the best part, the defensive line. Like Mesidor, I think getting through a season at the nose probably helps him get into a second season at the nose, because he's used to it now and he can figure out how to handle himself between games and get across the season. I got a feeling Dante Stills is coming back. I mean, he's hinted at it strongly now. And I don't know, by the time this comes out, maybe he has announced it, but it just seems like it's not going to be one guy that comes back. And then you're talking Stills, Mesidor, Alston's a junior. Sean Martin was pretty good this year. Jordan Jefferson, kind of unheralded, had a very good season in the middle there, certainly above his second season, even his first season too. But I think there were some questions to whether or not he could do it. He did. Sean Martin looked good. They have something with Edward Besterin, and they're going to get, continue to grow and develop there. That front can be really good. And the question with them has always been, can you have a front and a back together? They either haven't been healthy or haven't been the match of experience and talent front and back. They may have that now if the 2 safety spots click. I think they got a chance with the McLaurin kid from junior college, Hershey McLaurin. And then how they fill out that second safety spot is going to be interesting. it's probably going to have to be like Aubrey Burks or Davis Mallinger or someone like that. Perhaps they get another one. There's a lot of transfers available there for safety positions, but if they can do that, they're going to have a front to back defense that could become something pretty good with that blend of experience, size up front, and that front 6 or 7. The question mark for me is that bandit spot. I don't know what you guys think, but that's supposed to be the wrecking ball, and they just haven't really done that. And when you look at when it's been good, Bartlett ruined that poor kid's career at Virginia Tech that one game.
Yeah, he did.
Like to the point he never played again. I don't think. Like he came in as a backup, and they moved him out of the way. They put the center at right tackle, so they were on their third right tackle, and he was killing the guy. But like that's the one time that bandit position has really flashed. They have him, maybe it's Linnell Carr and it's a rotation of the two, but they just haven't had that zap at that position. And when their defense has been good at Troy, it's been the player of the year. It's been a first team all conference guy. And I understand it's a Sun Belt. It's a little bit different, but like Big 12 defenses always have that terror off the edge. They haven't really had that. They get their pass rush from blitzing and from just doing good stuff up front. But if you can have that guy where he stands up and he's like right over that tackle or he's right over a tight end and you're worried about him everywhere he goes, that's a real threat. That's one thing they've been missing. I wonder if or how they can do that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think also the thing that helps us out in that, on the defensive side is as much as it was painful to lose Jamil Dye to go to Georgia and how he was loved in West Virginia. I mean, I think this Jordan Leslie getting to run it and then having a second year, I think the guys like him in the room. And you see it from the transfer portal, you see it from everything you hear about the team. Like it seems like everything is clicking a lot better on the defensive side than the offensive side. So between that, coaching coming back, I mean, we could be back to being a top defense in the Big 12, I guess, would be my hope.
Has a chance. Again, if they keep their coaches together, that'll help too, because they've had some turnover there in the past couple of years for various reasons too. But I just think that the message has been the same for a while now, and then more importantly, the recipients are the same too. That'll help them get better.
Yeah, maybe the biggest news then in the offseason coaching wise for us is that Jordan Leslie didn't get that Troy job and that he's still with WVU
as we speak. Yeah,
right.
It's one of those things where it's just the nature of the college football offseason where it's built into different tiers, and you're going to keep your staff together probably until signing day, and then all bets are off. Guys are going to have deals and they're going to go. I'm not saying I know anything here, but it's certainly promising that he didn't get the Troy job, that he could be here for another year, however long. But if an SEC school, or if one of his friends, or if an ACC school says, "Hey, I would like you to DC down here and make more money," that's going to wait until after signing day. Like he's not going to bomb the recruiting class of West Virginia, unless he does, I guess. But typically, the honor among thieves, so to speak, is you wait until signing day comes and goes, and all of a sudden, jump ship. So
he's close with Neil, so I don't think he would do that to Neil.
Well, he's probably close with his career too. So if he's got a chance to move up,
right.
he might want to get out and get up. But you're right, he would probably try to preserve the recruiting class here as long as he can. So I always kind of laugh about that stuff. It feels really good, but it always feels really good in short windows in college football, because there's always a fox around the corner. You can never feel too safe because there's always a date where something can happen. It just they're built into the calendar that way.
So Mike, we're going into the off season here. We've got 2022 is one of those seasons. I feel like, as much as we're excited about it, it's a little stressful thinking about, two of your non-conference games are against old foes, old Big East foes, rivalries between Virginia Tech and Pitt. This team's looking a little worse for the wear coming off of this guaranteed rate loss. How important for Neil Brown is it next year that he does at least gets another bowl game appearance? I mean, he's done 2 back-to-back bowl games. Good for him. Didn't think we were going to make it this year. Kind of pulled that one out of the hat with the clock ticking. How important is it though that he, shows against this schedule next year?
Got to win. You just have to win. Like that's the one thing too. We can talk about, they could have won this one, well, they could have lost that one. The COVID year, this and that. The year 0 and year 1. That's fine, but like at some point you have to stop building in or allowing excuses. And you have to expect results. Like there has to be that production, and that's with everybody in every career, right? Sooner or later, You got to learn how to spell correctly, or you got to learn how to teach science correctly. You got to learn how to make the Big Mac correctly, right? So like it's the same. Like you have to do it. You have to. Like that's not an exception. And coaches get fired with winning records, never mind losing records. So, you're gonna see and catch a lot of spin, and you're already hearing it, which is fine. This is what they're supposed to do, but to me, I think that they were supposed to be good this season. They were. I just think that was the expectation. You don't extend a coach and his staff in the offseason secretly.
Yeah.
and build it in so there's no raise this year, but the raise comes next year. Why? Now you're giving the guy a huge raise off a 6-7 season, right? That doesn't make sense. It makes a lot of sense if you're 8-4, 8-5. You're like, oh, the raise makes sense. So I think they were supposed to be good this year. And again, they walked out the field against Oklahoma and into the post-game media and said, we'll see them in Dallas for the Big 12 championship game. Let's not laugh at that, but let's remember that at that point in time, they were really close to beating a top 10 team and thought, listen, we got it. We haven't perfected the formula, but we know what it's supposed to look like, and we'll do it, and we'll get there. Didn't happen. So they felt like they were that close in the middle of the season to being there at the end. You can't get at the end and say, well, actually, we're still a year or two away. That doesn't work. So what you have to do is you have to fill that gap by saying, we're going to win games, and you have to. So that first month is super important. Like that Kansas game would really worry me because that team is not. I don't think they're going away. I'm not sure that they're not here yet, but they're not going away, and they're going to have a recent experience against West Virginia. Granted, it's here, and until Kansas beats West Virginia's better than Kansas, but that's in a weird spot in the schedule, man. That one would really concern me because, correct me if I'm wrong here, you guys can pull this up. It's Pitt, Kansas, Towson, Tech. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
I hate that spot in the schedule because you're going to go up to that Pitt game, win or lose. That's going to take an emotional toll on you. And you're cruising because it's Kansas, and the next week is like Club Med against Towson. So that Kansas game would really concern me. So that first month of the season is extremely important to the present, I think, for Brown, but also the future. And then, if they don't have footing, it's going to be hard. Like a lot of these Texas teams, Baylor, Texas Tech, they're going to be loaded up at a time they haven't been recently. And you're also going to have Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. They're just going to be good again too. So it's going to be tough. You may get teams that take a step back in TCU or Iowa State. Possibly, we'll see. Like those teams lose a lot when they lose their coach, or lose a lot when they lose like their entire senior class, which is most of their roster. So that's going to be an expectation for those teams to dip a little bit. But who are they climbing over? That's going to be hard. They're above Kansas for sure. Kansas State's still there. Baylor's going to be good. TCU is going to be good.
I tell you, Mike, like, if we talk about it, and I'm like the eternal West Virginia optimist. Like I am the WVU fans. Like we're going to be eight. We're going to start the season 8-0. I look at next year's schedule, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this team right now would be like 1-7 to start the season. Like,
well, that Kansas quarterback is. I like that kid.
He's
well,
good.
And the thing too, Mike, is like what we've talked before, Scoot, coming out of this loss in the bowl game. If you get through those first 4 games, and you're 2-2, it's not like anyone feels good about that. I mean, if you're victorious over Towson and Kansas, and you've lost the 2 games that the fan base cares about.
Well, the casual fans care about too. That's the thing. It's not just
right.
It's the casual fans, the people that don't really pay much attention, and then they see, well, you lost to Pitt and Virginia Tech. What's going on?
Right. Talk about setting a bad tone for your conference play.
Now, Pitt loses their Heisman Trophy candidate quarterback. They lose a lot of their offensive line. Their defense has been good. They'll lose some players to the NFL, and just for natural reasons, that's winnable. And there's not going to be a great home field advantage there. And Tech looks terrible, right? So who knows what they're going to be like a couple months from now, too.
They feel like a mess, yeah.
So, listen, you have to grant them the possibility that they're 4-0, too. So it's that first month is extremely important because you're going to either cast or reverse perceptions about you there too. So it's a big time. And again, you've got to win sooner or later. Sooner would be a lot better than later.
Well, that's what I've said, that first 4 games and actually I included the bowl game. So the 5 games there are some of the most important games, I think, as far as Neil Brown is concerned at WVU, because like you said, if the team slumps in the beginning of the season, that's I think a definite hot seat. I think that puts him on the hot seat. However, if he's able to turn things around, that takes a lot of the pressure off.
Yeah, and I wonder what changes they would make if they're 2-2 or 1-3 or whatever. That 4-game thing is when guys will transfer a red shirt, so that would hurt. And then how itchy with quarterbacks. Like if you're starting Crowder for the first 4 games and he's 1-3 or 2-2, how do you not play Markio? How do you not play Green? Like you're right. It's a volatile time, and a whole lot is on the line there.
So I know, Mike, we said we were going to have you on just to talk football, but I just want to throw a basketball question at you real quick here. Just to, how do you feel? There's mixed emotions between the 3 of us. How do you feel about this basketball team going now into conference play? Tough loss to Texas yesterday, losing 3 guys to COVID or whatever. Is there anything optimistic to look forward to with these guys on the court?
I think they could be I think they can be like just hell raisers. They're not going to be great on offense, and they're going to blow a lot of things up on defense, but they're going to make it really hard on you. And if you think that's going to be a day off or a half off, you're probably going to be mistaken, and they'll get you. They're going to be tough to beat at home because they always are. They're not going to go away on the road because they never do. Like, they're going to play like Huggins. And I think this is small stuff, but what was promising Saturday was that was not a 30-point loss because it was going that way. And then, Huggins is really concerned about how Polycap and Kerrigan and Curry would react to the Big 12 and like the ups and downs of a season and what they're like, because they never really had that. They were on teams that, if they didn't win their big non-conference games, oh well, the MAC isn't that hard. Conference USA isn't that hard. The MAC being the Metro Athletic Atlantic Conference, not the Mid-American. That's where Polycap came from. I guess he came from the Big East, didn't he?
Yeah, with DePaul.
DePaul.
My point being, like, not the Big 12, not the brutal,
Yeah.
Day after day challenges. And, Polycap didn't have it Saturday, but Kerrigan and Curry, well, they didn't either in the first half. But it would have been very easy for those two to say, not today. This was tough. I learned my lesson here today. They played really hard in that second half, and they played well. They got points and rebounds, and they were empty points and rebounds because they got beat pretty good, but they could have packed it up, and they could have said, like, oh, man, this is not what I thought. And they figured that out in the middle of the game. I think that was promising, too. I liked what I saw from Bridges, and that's a guy who's got to wake up and has got to realize that the ball doesn't go in unless it leaves his hands. He's got to shoot more, and then, take your pick of your favorite stat for him. It was the 7 baskets. Was it 11 shots? Was it the 4 threes? Was it the 6 rebounds? Was it the 37 minutes? They're all good. And those are things we haven't seen from him. He hasn't played a lot. He hasn't shot or scored a lot. That's good. And when he realized, again, it's empty, but he was like, I got to make something out of this here. Like, am I just going to be like a mannequin in this game and we're going to get killed? I'm just a bystander. Am I going to do something? He tried. That's good. Got a silly technical foul, but I like the mean streak too, right? That was a guy who was angry and he kind of tried to take it out. So that's good. And then I just think there's something with their offense that they're going to have to find out, where if they play quick, and they try to get quick scores and early scores. They don't try to run motion and sets with point guards who just aren't point guards, and they over dribble and they overstare. They get themselves into bad spots because they try to run offense. And if they can find some like non-offense that makes any sense, like you're not good at offense, don't do offense, right?
Just fast break and steal the ball and go down and make them play.
That'd be great, right? Make them miss shots, rebound it and run, steal it and run. In a perfect world, yeah. But, they were scoring after Texas makes early in that game. So it's not like the Texas defense wasn't setting up. But they slowed down. They tried to get the ball inside, and they got in some bad habits of over dribbling and staring at the post. That's not good. When they kind of spread you out high and wide and they create space, that's when McNeil and Sherman can do some things. That's when you can get Bridges into pick and rolls. Like, there's something with their offense that can revert a little bit to last season when they got going and being like a spread out, 4 out, 5 out, sometimes offense. That's going to be fun. Can they get there? Can they do it? There's a lot of room to grow here. It's not going to be a team that competes at the Big 12 championship. I don't think. I could be wrong. But I think you're going to see a team that, could definitely be vying for like a 6 seed in the tournament just because they got hot and they won some games in Kansas City. And you say, okay, this is a team that's definitely one of the top 25 teams in the country, and they're not going to be a tough out, and they can score some points, but they're going to play defense and rebound. Rebounding is getting better. Defense has gotten a lot better. Can the offense get better? But that's been how many years question with this coach and his staff and things like that too. But they have more offensive threats now than they've had in a while.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Huggins tends to, he's Hugs. I mean, he has a tendency to be able to turn things around and get it, the ship sailing in the right direction towards the end of the season. But Mike, thanks so much for joining us. Guys, if you haven't got a chance, check out Mike's podcast. He's on with Chris Anderson with Country Roads Confidential. It's kind of like where I steal all of our content for every week. So thanks. I appreciate that.
At least you're honest about it.
And definitely, if you haven't got a chance, check out earsports.com. It's the 247 Sports site for West Virginia. Mike, there's a deal going on right now, too. People can sign up for VIP real cheap, right?
Yeah, we have them all the time. So I'm not saying don't do it now, but always keep your eyes open. If you're not going to do right now, you can sign up for $1 for the first month, and then everything gets back to normal after that. But you can also get out of it, too. That's fine. But always keep your eyes open. There's always 50% off, 60%, 75% off. They're like Easter eggs for us. They just pop up. We don't ever really know. Because they don't want people like me getting on a podcast saying, don't sign up now. Sign up on February 1st right now. But yeah, there's always something there. It's kind of hard to miss when we're promoting it. But I don't know if you'll find many more words written or spoken devoted that to the Mountaineers. Not the best words, but the most words.
I mean, you and Chris put out a ton of content, so it's awesome to follow. So
well, thanks, appreciate it.
Great. Well, thanks, Mike. Thanks for being on the show. We appreciate having you. And
no problem.
And guys, we're gonna take a break. We'll come back talk a little more basketball. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to Got Your Eers On. Vortec Knives is a West Virginia owned and operated company specializing in high quality steel, fast opening, everyday carrying knives. If you go to vortechknives.com today and use the code GYEO, you get a 25% discount on your entire order. That's Vortech, VORTEK Knives.com, a West Virginia owned and operated company specializing in fast opening, high quality, everyday carry knives. Vortec Knives. All right, everybody, welcome back to Got Your Ears On. Guido here along with Scoot and Johnson. And listen, don't forget, you can find us online. Look for us on social media. You can find us on Instagram or Twitter at Got Your Ears. You can also check out our website, gotyourearson.com. Johnson, it's kind of like the hub of everything about us.
It is the hub, gotyourearson.com. We always put the latest show in blog form there with all our show notes, links to stuff you can click on and check out farther. Further, Scoot? Farther.
Farther is distance.
Okay, further. And then you can also click on the tune in link right on the sidebar of the page. And don't forget the merch store, where if you click through anything that you buy at the GYEO merch store, will contribute to our payment into the Hugs Fish Fry. So check it out.
Yeah, Bob Huggins Fish Fry coming up February 18th. It's the 10th anniversary of the Bob Huggins Fish Fry. You can also check that out at bobhugginsfishfry.com and check out our website, gotyourearson.com. Speaking of Bob Huggins, guys, the Mountaineers played this past weekend, and it was a rough go at it against Texas in Austin, 74-59. And I'm going to start with, the big news is that Taz, Gabe, and Kobe Johnson were all out. And I don't know if any of you listened to the postgame, but I thought it was interesting. So Huggins was talking in the postgame that he found out on the plane that somebody came back to him while the flight was en route to Austin and said, hey, we got 3 guys on the plane that are COVID positive.
That's not a great feel.
No.
As you're the coach, that's probably like, oh, man. Because now you're thinking, how do we isolate these guys on this plane? We're all kind of breathing in the same air, hopefully. And I think I did read that he had guys wearing masks on the plane, so I don't know that. Hopefully they were wearing them the whole time, but I'm sure people are eat and drink and do all that kind of stuff. So
well, and he also made the comment, Guido, that I think at some point he said, like Scoot said, they're all wearing masks and, quote, they were all boosted.
Right.
That's what he was saying. So I think he was just showing his frustration. Like, not only did they feel like they were taking precautions, but I got the impression he was kind of like, look, what's the process here? Isn't this kind of like you guys are saying, you can't be learning this and finding out en route. Now you're pretty much, I have a feeling you're walking in at warm-ups and trying to figure out, okay, now how do we configure a starting 5? How's this going to work? This was going to be a tall task even without this. With that going on, it really completely, shook up the whole make of this game. By halftime, you could tell, they were really still trying to figure things out.
Well, and I'm going to say this, Guido. I think what we saw yesterday against Texas is what I've been kind of getting at, that is a problem for our team, is that, and Johnson's alluded to this earlier as well, where we don't really run an offense except for the fact that we try to get Sean McNeil or Taz Sherman available to score.
Right.
And when you lose one of those guys, and Sean McNeil isn't the creator that Taz Sherman is, it makes for a very stagnant offense. And I think we were stuck on 16 points for something like 37 minutes, it felt like.
Right. It felt like an eternity.
It was like, oh my God, are we ever going to score more than 16 points? And I think that's a big part
Scoot.
of it.
It allows the defense to just sort of blanket Sean.
And that's what they did. He could not
and that's what
get
they did.
loose.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
he scored 7 of his 12 points in the first half, and then they really, started shutting him down in the second half. I think
who they have on Andrew Jones, I think they had on him for a good bit of the game.
And he was doing, I thought at least in the first 5 minutes of the game, I thought he was doing a pretty good job of creating his shots and making space for himself. But and then they just figured it out and they shut it down. And congrats to Jalen Bridges, who I thought was the one, bright spot in the whole thing, Johnson. I mean, he had a tremendous game considering the circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, Scoot, Guido and I aren't bashful about our love for JB. He really showed up this game, I thought. Unfortunately, once again, we needed some other compliments. I think JB goes 7 of 11, Guido. I think he was 4 of 7 from 3. I mean, he really shot well. This is the first I feel like we've seen what we thought we might see out of Jalen Bridges. It's a shame that it's a shame that Taz and Sean aren't together with him on the floor when this is going on. But at least if you're trying to pull some bright spots out of this game, I think JB's obviously where you're looking.
He played with a lot of energy, which I feel like we haven't seen at times. And I texted you guys this. For me, I need to see it in multiple games back to back. We can't just have this one game where he scores 18, 20 points, and then next game he's back down to 4.
Yeah, sure. Right.
Like we've got to see consistency. This is his 3rd year in the program, so it's not like he's a freshman. He's not like he's trying to, sift through some sort of role. He's got a role. He's the starting swingman, basically. Or I guess at times even a power forward for us. So, like, he's got a role. He just has to be assertive. And I think that's what everyone seems to say is if he's aggressive and assertive, that's the guy we thought we were getting. Yeah,
I agree. I think, Guido, I know I keep harping on it, but once again, I sat watching this game thinking this is where I wish we really had the true point guard that I thought we might get this year. I think Kedrian kind of struggled on the offensive side. I think he had 4 turnovers, unfortunately. Malik Curry somehow... I say somehow because I watch Malik Curry play. It seems a bit chaotic at times, but he actually goes, I think, for second leading in points on the team. I think he finished with 14, only 1 turnover, but a lot of his play feels like it's kind of all over the half court, so.
Yeah, and Malik Curry has quickly become the most frustrating person for me to watch on this team because first half of the game, he's a train wreck. Like, he had 2 turnovers in the span of 30 seconds.
Yeah, it felt super sloppy. Yeah,
he didn't score any points. And then second half, he comes back, he plays well, he scores all 14 of his points in the second half to be the second leading scorer. It's just oh my gosh, it's so frustrating to watch him.
No,
Scooty.
I totally agree.
I think with Malik, and I don't know this obviously, but from having coached and having watched a lot of basketball, I feel like he's still struggling to fit in. He came from Old Dominion where he was the leading scorer, averaged 16 points a game last year. I think when we see him in the first half, when he goes into a game, he feels he has to score 20 points in the 4-minute block of time that he gets because he's probably worried if I don't, I'm not going to get it back on the floor.
Yeah,
and he's not used to that. He's a starter from where, he's probably started his entire life.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. So there were a couple of folks tweeting on Mountaineer Twitter about they just feel like he's pressing. And I think they're right. Like you see him playing, he's got ability. I think when he's good, he's the point guard that I think, we could really benefit from. He is able to drive and kick a bit, which I wish this team would really embrace with these shooters we have. But then you watch him at other times, it's like he's just trying to do too much. He's a bit out of control. So I agree with you. I think that's what we're seeing.
And I think we're seeing to me, of the 3 transfers we have Kerrigan, we have Polycap, and we have Malik Curry. I think Polycap has probably adjusted himself the best to the role that he's playing because he comes in, he plays with some energy, he gets you a block or 2, maybe a rebound or 2, he plays kind of tough. I still think he's a little undersized for where we have him playing, but he's done well. Diamond Kerrigan at times is like, this guy's awesome. He's a great rim protector. But at the same time, I think he's also struggling a little bit in the sense that he feels he's got to do more than he's capable of doing in his short spurt of time. Again, the highly touted high school guy has kind of drifted around, a kind of a journeyman, and has struggled. And that's what I think I'm seeing when he goes up to dunk twice and he gets blocked by the rim. Like there's no real reason for him to not be able to dunk those 2 balls that he got blocked by the rim. And it got to the point where I think even the fans were kind of getting on him, and he was kind of in his own head a little bit on the offensive end.
Yeah, and I think, too, it's interesting. You bring up the blocks. Don't you think it's an interesting stat that for the game, I mean, I know, look, this game actually wasn't as close as the score would indicate, in my opinion, but you look at some of these stats, 9 of 11 from the free throw line, and Scoot, you brought up blocks. 9 blocks in this game for WVU, which I think really pops out at you. There is some between Kerrigan and Polycab. I feel like there's sometimes a goaltend waiting to happen, but there are a lot of blocks. I think they make guys alter shots under the basket. So it's interesting. Texas has no blocks, where I always feel like they have size to spare, and here we are 9 blocks on the box score.
Also interesting, Isaiah Cottrell with 3 blocks.
Yeah,
so
that's
maybe
right.
some of that defensive presence is rubbing off, because we need somebody that's 6'10" or bigger, right? We cannot run 6'8" guys out and have them go up against some of these giants that we're going to see in conference. So the fact that Isaiah put in a little bit more of a defensive showing, I think that's a good thing for WVU.
I also want to say that I think, we talk about Taz and losing Taz and the points that Taz and what Taz can create by losing him. I think losing Gabe was also big in this game on the defensive side, because you saw a lot more drive. You didn't see somebody who was filling the lane and taking those charges. And, I mean, we've said this before, like Gabe's wingspan is like 13 feet. I mean, he's ginormous when he stands out in the middle there. And, when you have, Marcus Carr, Ramey, and Jones all, scoring 20, 15, and 14 points respectively, I mean, somebody's got to be able to break that up, and we didn't really have that.
What do you think? Gabe, to me, when I watch Gabe play, he always looks kind of ticked off. Mm-hmm. When they tested them on the plane or right before they left, what kind of facial expressions do you think Gabe had when he said he kind of probably treated it like he got called for a foul? Because every foul that Gabe has ever been called for, he disagrees with. He's like, yes. He's got this like, that wasn't me. What's wrong with you kind of look.
I did test positive.
Right.
He
was probably so ticked off that he tested positive.
And Scoot, is Courtney Ramey working on a doctorate?
Oh my God.
How long can he graduate, for goodness sake?
Courtney Ramey and Andrew Jones and Brock Cunningham.
I feel like they've been torturing us for season after season.
At the end of the game, and I don't know if you guys saw this, for the last minute of the game, Chris Beard brings in Yosemite Sam that he brought over from Texas Tech.
Avery Benson.
This Avery Benson character who looks like Yosemite Sam. I was like, what the heck is this guy? And then I thought, he's a walk-on. No, it's that freak from Texas Tech. And he looks like freaking Yosemite Sam. He's got some ridiculous mustache. Like I don't know, rode in on a horse or a motorcycle or both. I don't know.
Yes, I noticed. I knew when I saw Avery Benson come in the game, I knew that Scoot had to say something better this week.
I knew that was coming.
Like, what the heck?
I don't even think he played a minute. I don't even think
like
he played
some of
1
these
minute.
schools are employing guys that are 35 years old to come out and play basketball for them. We have an old team, but I feel like, okay, maybe you're like, oh, Taz Sherman's still there, but he's only been here for 3 years. This is only his 3rd year. We don't have any 5 or 6 year seniors like some of these other schools seem to have.
So WVU loses to Texas 59-74. And yeah, Johnson, you're correct. Like, that score sounds closer than that game really was. I mean, WVU only had 20 points at halftime. It was rough. It was a rough go.
It was rough. It was a rough watch.
The TCU game for Monday night was postponed due to TCU having COVID issues. And so WVU doesn't play again until January 8th in the Coliseum. And Huggins said in his post game that he's concerned that Taz may not be cleared to come back by then. Gabe may not be cleared to come back by then. So I guess, it's still up in the air on how the Big 12 and how WVU is handling the number of days that they are allowed to be out, because now the CDC says it's 5 and the NFL lets you do it in 15 minutes and whatever the rules are now. So Huggins was, as of the end of the game on Saturday, wasn't sure of the status for Taz and those guys. Huggins was pretty upset after that game, guys. It was the most down I've heard him in a long time. He actually said that this is the most embarrassed he's been on coaching a team that can't run a set. He's like, I'm so embarrassed. And I don't know, again, we talk about this a lot with Bob Huggins. Is that coach speak, Scooty? Is that truth? Like, where is he on this?
So some of it I think is coach speak, right? Because in his mind, he's got 18 freaking fifth-year seniors on this team. It feels like it. He's got a bunch of seniors, right? So the fact that he's got these older guys and they can't do what he's asking them to do is probably pretty frustrating. But I do think there are a lot of moving parts, right? Like the whole mindset that Malik Curry has, and you've got Kedrian Johnson who is pressing, and I think he was actually probably injured earlier than what we actually saw him, because he looked like he was grabbing at his hamstring or his knee, kind of came out, then came back in. So I think that's a factor, but he probably also in his mind is thinking, listen, I can't afford to not play. We've got some guys down. It is frustrating because we saw a lot of I said we saw what I think guys have kind of conditioned themselves to. If Taz or Sean aren't scoring, they kind of forget where to go on these offenses. Maybe you're not used to running them.
Right.
Yeah,
so I think that's where
Hugs
is
that's kind of
frustrated.
like those guys kind of have a security blanket. I mean, they can do a bit of standing on offense because Taz will create a shot or something. I think you're right. I think the other thing, Guido, it was interesting to hear Hugs kind of taking some swings here. I just felt like he was in a bad mood in general after this game. Like he was saying stuff like Texas isn't a hard building to play in. Like you can hear conversations and he was like swinging at everyone. I think there was some comment, Guido, correct me, but he said they've got a good collection of players from different conferences. Like he was taking a swing at.
Yeah, he said that they've got all the best players from all these other conferences. Right. They should be good.
Right. So it just felt like he was just overall like, let's get out of Austin. Like this whole thing has sucked, and
And Tony Caridi asked him, he says, is there anything, and kudos, by the way, to Tony Caridi. For those of you who don't know, Jay Jacobs also out on COVID protocols yesterday. So Tony called the whole game by himself. And then, after one of these games where we get, just pounded into the sand, Coach takes forever to come out and do the post-game press. Tony Caridi vamped. Tony Caridi was vamping and everything. There were like 25 commercial breaks. He was talking about, the travel. I mean, I'm surprised Tony Caridi didn't start talking about the food in Austin, Texas. But Tony asked him, he said, was there anything good to come out of this? And Huggins didn't even answer the question. He's like, it's not going to change. It's not going to change until we stop shortcutting everything, until we start to do things right, until we can't even catch, he goes, we can't even catch a ball. So I mean, it was rare form for Huggins after
it's
the game.
not funny, but it just makes me laugh because it feels like my dad. He's like, get it. I don't even want to look at you right now. Just get out of here. Like when your dad helps you with, like my dad used to help me with baseball. He's like, you know what, just go over there for a little bit. when you're on like a little league team or something.
Do we think that Jay found out that he was positive on the plane too? A lot of times these guys all travel together, so I'm wondering.
Right.
So that could have been kind of like Tony Caridi punting most of the broadcast because he's not prepared to just be by himself.
Well, and logically, I mean, is Hugs in a bad mood now because he's expecting them to come back and tell him the whole team now has to be quarantined or something?
He's probably he's probably in the back of your mind thinking that.
And the game, looking forward, Guido, the game that was going to be played with TCU has been postponed already, right? So they have a little bit of time. I don't know if silver lining, maybe it gives these guys time to maybe get right, and get healthy because you have a game now postponed.
Yeah. And, and the thing is, though, is how does that affect practices? You have a K-State team coming in next week that's not that great. Play Saturday at 2 p.m. That game's on ESPN Plus, by the way. Yep, it's time for everybody's favorite, Bruce Weber, to come into town. We'll see what happens. I think it's going to be a really up and down crazy season this year with the way COVID's going and how these protocols work. I think you're going to see a lot of teams. We're going to play a lot of teams without guys. A lot of teams are going to play us without guys. It'll be interesting. Guys, some other basketball news we should talk about before we wrap it up this week. Congratulations to Jaysean Page. Gets called up to the Pistons, Johnson.
Yeah, he got called up on a recent contract. I think he was playing in the main, the Pistons' main G League team. So, I mean, that's amazing. I think he signs a 10-day contract, Guido. I'm admittedly not versed on how those contracts work, but I have to imagine he's over the moon excited, and it's cool to see him. We've already been watching Deuce now contribute huge for the Knicks, and seeing Jaysean get some time is just super cool. I think he's been killing it lately in G League play.
Yeah, the NBA is just trying to get bodies up right now because they're having COVID issues as well. So that's why they're doing those 10-day NBA contracts. Also, Scooty, Truck Bryant announces his retirement from basketball.
It sounds like he's extinguishing his flame. right? He's no longer on fire.
He's no longer on fire.
He had been on fire, but he's no longer on fire.
It's hard to believe, though, that, it's hard to believe that 2010 team, I mean, that's 11 years ago now. It's hard, you don't think, I reminisce about those guys all the time, so you don't think about how much basketball time. I mean, 11 years in basketball time, that's a long time. So to think of Truck retiring, at first I was like, really? But then, I mean, that's a lot of, you're 11 years older. That's a lot of wear and tear on an athlete's body. So I guess those guys are now, getting to a point where that's a possibility. But good for Truck. I mean, I know he had a ton of success post WVU play. So I mean, that's cool for him.
And again, kudos to him. I mean, a lot of those guys from that team, especially from that 2010 team, went on to play professionally and, all over the world. So, they've all done really well for themselves, including Truck. So, all right, everybody, listen, we're going to wrap it up this week for the show. Thanks to Mike Casazza for joining us and being on the show. We really appreciate it, and it was fun having him on. And we'll be back next week with another show, I guess only talking about one basketball game, it looks like, if that one even happens on Saturday when WVU plays K-State in the Coliseum. 2 p.m. tip-off. That game is on ESPN+. Tickets still available if you want to get in there in the Coliseum and hear Bruce Weber scream like a seagull. And don't forget, look for us online. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Got Your Ears. You can also search for us on Facebook and check out our website, gotyourearson.com. Thanks, everybody, for listening. You've been listening to Got Your Ears On.